The auditorium was alive with excitement, a mix of laughter, chatter, and the soft tapping of feet on the polished floor. It was the annual music showcase, an event that the whole town looked forward to every year. Parents, teachers, and students had gathered, filling every seat, and the air smelled faintly of polished wood and old curtains. Some children clutched their instruments tightly, their parents whispering encouragements, while others walked nervously to the stage to check their positions. Among the performers, there was one small figure who barely reached the top of the piano bench, yet carried a seriousness that was rare for someone so young. The young pianist had always loved music more than anything else. From the time they could reach the keys, the piano had become a world of comfort, a place where thoughts could flow without interruption, where imagination could become sound. Many evenings were spent sitting on the bench long after everyone else had gone to bed, hands moving over the keys, listening to the way melodies could twist and turn, rise and fall, and eventually settle into something beautiful. It was not just practice. It was a conversation, a way to speak when words were too heavy or too simple. Yet tonight felt different. Tonight, there was a visiting teacher from far away, an American music teacher whose reputation filled the halls long before she even arrived. She was known for her skill, her sharp eye, and her strict opinions. Stories about her critiques spread like wildfire among students. She did not give praise easily, and she did not tolerate mistakes. Some students had said that she could make even the most talented musicians feel small, and now she was here walking quietly through the rows of chairs, scanning the performers, clipboard in hand. Her eyes, sharp and unyielding, rested briefly on the small pianist, and she raised an eyebrow almost imperceptibly, a look that said she doubted anything impressive would come from someone so young. The young pianist noticed her glance, felt it like a cold shadow falling over their small shoulders. A little knot of fear formed in the stomach, twisting with excitement and anticipation. It was one thing to perform in front of family and friends where smiles and encouragement could ease the nerves. It was quite another to play under the gaze of someone whose judgment was feared by even the best musicians. Yet beneath the fear, a determination began to grow. The music was theirs, and the piano had no age, no expectations beyond the notes waiting to be played. Backstage, the young pianist adjusted the bench, ensuring it was the right height, and ran fingers lightly over the keys, feeling their familiar grooves and cool surface. The sound of other performances floated through the curtains. There was a violinist whose bow moved gracefully across the strings, a flutist who made the air shimmer with each note, and older students who seemed confident and calm. Everyone else had practiced for this moment, but no one had the quiet fire of someone who had spent countless nights alone with the music, learning to listen not just with the ears but with the heart. The American teacher moved from one performer to the next, making notes, frowning here, nodding there, yet never giving more than a fleeting glance of approval. When she stopped at the young pianist, she crossed her arms and tilted her head slightly, her expression unreadable. A few whispers from nearby students and parents could be heard. She looks so small. How can she even reach the keys properly? I don't think she's ready for this level yet. Let's see what she can really do. The words hung in the air like small clouds of doubt, but the young pianist ignored them, focusing instead on the black and white keys that had always been a safe place. A deep breath was taken. Fingers hovered over the first notes, ready to bring them to life. There was a quiet calm that settled over the small figure, a calm that came from years of practice and a love for the piano that was stronger than any fear of judgment. The audience settled in, the rustling of programs slowing down, and the lights dimmed just enough to make the stage feel like a small island of focus in the middle of the crowded room. All eyes were about to turn to the young pianist. The piano itself seemed to recognize the importance of the moment. Its polished surface reflected the soft stage lights, and the keys waited silently as if holding their breath alongside the performer. Every note was ready, waiting for the gentle pressure of the young hands to awaken it. The small pianist placed both hands on the keys, feeling the familiar weight and texture. It was comforting. It was home, and for the first time that evening, there was no thought of the teacher's critical eyes, no worry about whether the performance would impress. There was only the music waiting to be released. In that moment, memories flashed through the young pianist's mind. Evenings spent learning the scales, mistakes made over and over. Late nights of practice when everyone else was asleep. There were moments of frustration when a piece refused to flow, and moments of triumph when a melody finally sounded just right. There were small victories, a parent's quiet nod of approval, a friend's smile, the thrill of mastering something thought impossible. All of that effort, all of that passion led to this one point. The fingers knew the journey and the heart felt the story behind every note. The room seemed to quiet even more. People leaned forward slightly, sensing that something different was about to happen. Children stopped whispering. Adults paused mid-breath, and even the older performers waiting their turn felt a hush fall over the space. The American teacher, who had been confident in critical moments before, now looked slightly uncertain. Her pen hovered over her clipboard, her sharp eyes widening just enough to betray curiosity. The first note was soft, almost shy, but it filled the room with a clarity that drew everyone in. It was a sound that seemed too big for someone so small, a sound that carried confidence and emotion in equal measure. The young pianist's hands moved with a grace that seemed natural, flowing over the keys as though the music had always been a part of them. Every chord, every trill, every delicate passage was precise yet alive, technical yet full of feeling. The audience, once full of whispers and skepticism, began to lean in, drawn by the pure honesty of the performance. The teacher's pen stilled. She no longer looked dismissive. There was no frown, no raised eyebrow, only attention, focused entirely on the young musician in front of her. The notes filled the auditorium, moving through the crowd in waves, touching the hearts of those who had come expecting ordinary performances. The small pianist, unaware of how much eyes were watching, played not to impress, not to compete, but because the music demanded it. Each sound seemed to carry a story, a message, a feeling that words could not capture. Backstage, parents held their breath, silently cheering, silently hoping. They had seen their child practice for years, but no one could predict how the room would respond tonight. Friends in the audience exchanged glances, mouths slightly open as they too were caught by surprise. What began as a small nervous moment had grown into something extraordinary. The young pianist's courage and love for the instrument had transformed fear into confidence, and doubt into wonder. The small figure on the piano bench continued to play, completely absorbed. The notes danced and swirled in the air, shaping a story that everyone could feel but no one could name. People began to forget themselves, forgetting the teacher's reputation, forgetting the whispers of doubt, and simply listening. Some closed their eyes, letting the music fill their minds. Others watched, amazed at the small hands that could create such a big, moving sound. The American teacher, once skeptical and dismissive, now watched silently, her thoughts unreadable, though her body leaned slightly forward, betraying a deep and undeniable attention. The first part of the evening ended with the soft echo of the last note lingering in the air. For a moment there was silence, the kind of silence that holds the entire room in awe. Then came a gentle murmur, a ripple of applause that grew steadily, building as more and more people realized what they had just witnessed. It was not just a performance. It was a revelation, a moment of discovery, a young musician proving that passion and talent could surpass expectations. The young pianist lowered their hands, heart still racing, but face calm. There was a quiet pride, not loud or boastful, but deep and certain. They had played from the heart, and for the first time tonight it felt like the music had played back. People around clapped softly, some standing, some whispering words of praise. The American teacher, her critical demeanor softened, simply nodded, almost imperceptibly, as if acknowledging that she had been proven wrong. It was the beginning of something much bigger than anyone could have predicted. The young pianist, once just a small figure in the crowded auditorium, had stepped into the light with courage, skill, and a love for music that could not be ignored. And though the night was far from over, this first moment, this first performance, had already left a mark on everyone present. The applause from the first performance had barely settled when the young pianist quietly stepped away from the stage, letting the next performer prepare. Backstage, the room was filled with nervous energy. Some students whispered words of encouragement to each other, while parents clutched programs in their hands, their eyes darting between the performers and the stage. The young pianist, still catching their breath, leaned against the wall and tried to calm the racing heart. There was a strange mix of relief and anticipation. The first part of the evening had gone well, but the night was far from over. The American teacher had not moved from her seat. She was still observing, her pen resting lightly on her clipboard. For the first time, she seemed genuinely curious. The whispers and murmurs of doubt she had heard before the performance seemed almost distant now. She glanced again at the young pianist who was barely visible behind the curtain, adjusting their shirt and rolling shoulders to loosen tension. Her eyes were sharp, yet something had changed. There was a flicker of acknowledgement, a silent recognition of talent, even if she would not yet voice it aloud. It was then that the young pianist's parents came closer, offering gentle smiles and small words of comfort. "You did beautifully," the mother whispered, brushing a strand of hair from their face. "We're so proud of you." The father nodded, squeezing their shoulder lightly. "Remember, this is just one moment. Just play from your heart. The rest will follow." Their words carried warmth and reassurance, but the young pianist could feel the lingering pressure. The American teacher was still there, still watching, and though she had not spoken a harsh word, her reputation was enough to make anyone tense. The next challenge came unexpectedly. While waiting for the stage, a fellow student approached with a teasing smile. "Did you see her face? She didn't think you'd even make it through the first song. Think you can do the next piece?" The words were meant to be playful, yet they carried a weight that made the young pianist pause. For a brief moment, self-doubt crept in. Could they really continue to impress? Could they live up to the first performance, or would the pressure crush the joy they had felt? The young pianist took a deep breath, closing eyes for just a second, feeling the familiar vibration of the piano in their memory. It was like remembering a friend's voice, calm and steady. When it was time to perform again, the young pianist walked to the stage, this time with more awareness of the audience. The seats were now more crowded. Parents and students had shifted, leaning forward in anticipation. The soft glow of stage lights fell on the polished piano, and the young hands reached for the keys. The room was quiet, almost expectant. There was a subtle energy that came not from noise but from attention, from people leaning in, waiting to hear something extraordinary. The new piece was different from the first. It was longer, with more complicated sections requiring both technical skill and emotional expression. The young pianist's fingers trembled slightly at first as they traced the keys, but the sound that came forth quickly silenced any doubts. The notes were clean, precise, and filled with a gentle confidence. Every chord, every pause, every melody was deliberate. The audience could feel the story unfolding in front of them, like watching a painter brush strokes across a blank canvas, revealing something beautiful that no one could have predicted. The American teacher leaned forward, pen hovering above the clipboard. Her face, once neutral, now carried a hint of surprise. The young pianist's control over the instrument, the emotion poured into each note, was undeniable. She could see the countless hours of practice, the dedication, the patience that had been required to reach this moment. It was not just talent. It was discipline, focus, and an understanding of music far beyond the player's years. The performance was no longer just a test. It was a lesson unfolding in real time for everyone to witness. Backstage, the parents exchanged glances, their hearts full of pride and a touch of disbelief. They had always known their child was special, but seeing the audience respond in real time brought a new level of amazement. Friends and neighbors whispered excitedly, pointing out the small hands moving with skill, the expressions on the young pianist's face, the quiet confidence that grew with every note. There was something magical about the way the music seemed to lift from the piano, filling the room with a story that words could never capture. Halfway through the piece, the young pianist paused briefly, letting the last chord linger. The silence that followed was heavy, but it was not uncomfortable. The audience was caught in the spell, holding their breath, waiting for what would come next. The pause was deliberate, a moment to shape the tension and allow the music to breathe. Then the hands moved again, fingers dancing over the keys, creating a cascade of sound that was at once delicate and powerful. The melody seemed to weave through the room, touching every listener, evoking emotions that were both personal and universal. The American teacher could no longer hide her fascination. Her eyes widened slightly, and a small nod betrayed a hint of admiration. She was a critic by nature, trained to find flaws, but here, there were none that she could see. The young pianist was in control, commanding both the piano and the attention of the room. Every note was intentional, every passage flowing naturally, yet with precision that was remarkable for someone so young. It was a performance that defied expectations and gently challenged the assumptions of everyone present. Audience members who had been skeptical at first began to shift in their seats. Some leaned forward, eyes glistening with emotion. Some whispered to each other, unable to believe what they were hearing. There were gasps at particularly challenging sections, soft murmurs of appreciation, and the occasional clapping of hands that had been unable to contain excitement. Even those who knew music well were impressed by the combination of technical skill and emotional depth. It was rare to see such mastery in a young performer, and the effect was unmistakable. Backstage, the energy was tense yet electric. The young pianist could feel it, though they tried not to let it distract them. Every note mattered. Every chord carried meaning. The pressure of performing in front of such an influential teacher and a captivated audience was immense, yet it had also sharpened focus. The small pianist was learning to turn fear into energy, uncertainty into determination. Every mistake that might have happened before was now an opportunity to express creativity and confidence. The piece continued, each section flowing naturally into the next. The young pianist's hands moved with a grace that seemed effortless, though anyone who knew the hours of practice behind it could see the effort hidden beneath the surface. There was a rhythm not just in the music, but in the movement of the performer, a harmony between body and instrument that made every phrase sing. The audience was no longer just watching. They were part of the story, carried along by the emotion and skill unfolding before them. By the end of the piece, the young pianist had captured the room completely. The final chord resonated through the auditorium, holding for a heartbeat longer than expected. For a moment, there was absolute silence. The weight of the performance, the culmination of talent, practice, and courage, filled the space. Then slowly, applause began, growing louder and louder until it became a roar of appreciation. People were on their feet, clapping, cheering, some with tears in their eyes, overwhelmed by what they had just experienced. The American teacher, who had sat silently through the performance, finally allowed herself a small, genuine smile. It was a rare gesture from someone known for her stern demeanor. She walked slowly toward the young pianist, her pen tucked away, her posture relaxed but her eyes focused. Though she did not speak immediately, there was an undeniable respect in her gaze. The young performer had exceeded all expectations, and even a critic as sharp as her could not ignore the skill and heart that had been displayed. After the performance, the young pianist returned backstage, hands still slightly trembling from adrenaline, face flushed with effort and excitement. Parents rushed forward, hugging tightly, whispering words of pride and love. Friends and other performers looked on with awe, inspired and motivated by what they had seen. It was not just a personal triumph. It was a moment that would ripple through the entire music community. A story of courage, dedication, and talent proving itself against doubt. The teacher approached the young pianist, finally breaking the silence. Her voice was calm yet firm, carrying a weight that could only come from genuine experience. "You have a gift," she said simply, "and more importantly, you have the heart to use it. Keep practicing, keep listening, and never stop playing with feeling. This was something special." The words, though few, meant more than any detailed critique or instruction. They were recognition, respect, and encouragement rolled into one. The young pianist nodded, overwhelmed but grateful. There was no need to speak more. The applause still echoed faintly in the background, the audience still buzzing from the performance. The night had only begun, but a turning point had been reached. The small pianist had stepped into a larger world, one where talent, courage, and dedication could shine, even in the face of doubt. The memory of the American teacher's initial skepticism now seemed almost distant, replaced by a quiet pride and renewed determination to continue growing. After the applause from the second performance died down, the young pianist remained backstage for a few moments, hands still lightly shaking from the rush of adrenaline. The room around them buzzed with quiet conversations and footsteps as other students prepared for their performances. Teachers whispered advice, parents exchanged proud glances, and friends gave gentle pats on the back. Even amidst the movement, the young pianist felt a strange calm, a mixture of satisfaction and anticipation. The evening was far from over, but there was a growing sense that something remarkable had already begun to unfold. The American teacher, who had been observing quietly, finally moved from her seat. She approached the piano with careful steps, her eyes fixed on the small figure at the bench. Her posture was composed, but there was a subtle shift in the way she held herself. The skepticism that had marked her earlier expressions seemed to soften, replaced by curiosity and an almost cautious respect. It was as if she were trying to understand not just the skill of the young pianist, but the heart behind it. Meanwhile, whispers circulated among the audience. Some parents leaned closer to their children, speaking in hushed tones.
"Did you hear how precise each note was?"
One parent asked. "And yet it felt so alive, so full of emotion," another replied. Students who had come expecting a routine performance now shared surprised smiles with one another. The small pianist, once underestimated and overlooked, had captured the attention of everyone in the auditorium. Even the older performers, many of whom had more experience, glanced sideways with expressions that mixed admiration and disbelief. Backstage, the young pianist adjusted the bench once more, preparing for the next piece. It was slightly longer and far more challenging than the previous selections. The sheet music, once intimidating, now felt like a familiar friend. The hands hovered above the keys and a deep breath was taken. The fingers traced the smooth surface, feeling the cool texture beneath them. In that brief pause, memories of late-night practices and quiet mornings alone with the piano came rushing back. Every mistake, every triumph, every long hour spent perfecting a difficult section had led to this moment. The audience grew quiet as the young pianist stepped onto the stage once again. The lights focused on the small figure, highlighting the intensity and focus that radiated from every movement. The room seemed to hold its breath. Parents clutched programs tightly. Friends leaned forward with wide eyes, and even the American teacher watched in silence, pen tucked under her arm. The atmosphere was charged with anticipation, a mix of curiosity and respect for what was about to happen. The first notes of the new piece filled the auditorium softly, almost shyly, but there was an undeniable clarity in each sound. The young pianist's hands moved with precision, fingers dancing lightly over the keys. Each chord resonated with care and intention, every trill and arpeggio a statement of skill and emotion. The music was no longer just notes on a page. It was a story unfolding in real time. The audience was drawn in, leaning forward, unable to look away as the performance built momentum. With every passing measure, the young pianist grew more confident. The initial nerves melted into focus and the music flowed naturally from the hands. There was a rhythm to the movement, a harmony between body and instrument that made even the most challenging sections seem effortless. The audience could feel the dedication behind each note, the countless hours of practice that had shaped the hands capable of such control. Every phrase carried intention and heart, making it impossible to doubt the talent in front of them. The American teacher's expression shifted slowly. She had arrived expecting a routine performance from a small child, perhaps a display of basic skill and enthusiasm. What she saw now was entirely different. The young pianist was not just playing the notes, they were breathing life into them. Emotion and technique blended seamlessly. There were moments of subtlety that required sensitivity and understanding beyond the years, and moments of power and clarity that demanded technical mastery. She was witnessing not just talent, but a depth of connection with music that few could teach and fewer could achieve at such a young age. Halfway through the piece, the music became more complex. Rapid sequences of notes demanded precise timing and coordination. The young pianist's fingers moved in a blur, yet each note was perfectly placed, clean and intentional. The audience gasped quietly at particularly challenging passages, impressed by the speed and accuracy. Parents whispered to each other, marveling at the combination of skill and emotional expression. Friends exchanged excited looks, silently cheering for someone they had known for years, now watching them shine in a way that felt larger than life. The young pianist felt a surge of energy with every measure. The hands and mind worked together in perfect harmony, translating years of dedication into sound that could touch anyone listening. There was no room for fear now, only music. Every chord carried meaning. Every pause was intentional. Every crescendo was a voice. The performer had become part of the instrument, and the instrument had become a part of them. The notes filled the auditorium, weaving an invisible thread that connected the audience, the teacher, the parents, and the young pianist in a shared moment of wonder. The American teacher remained silent but attentive, leaning slightly forward. Her pen, once ready for notes of criticism, rested at her side. She studied the young pianist's technique closely, the curve of the hands, the subtle movements of the wrists, the control over dynamics and tempo. But more than the technical skill, she observed the connection with the music itself. There was heart in every note, feeling in every phrase. She realized that no critique could capture the essence of this performance because it was more than skill. It was artistry. Backstage, parents and friends held their breath, trying not to disrupt the moment yet unable to hide their pride. The young pianist's face was calm, focused, yet there was a small, barely noticeable smile. They were not performing to impress anyone. They were performing to share the music, and the audience responded with the kind of attention that comes from genuine wonder. Every eye in the room followed the hands, every ear absorbed the sound. Every heart recognized the effort and love poured into the performance. As the piece reached its climax, the music became more expressive, with dynamic shifts and emotional depth that could make listeners feel everything from joy to tension. The audience was captivated. Some closed their eyes to experience it fully, while others watched the hands move with awe. Even the older students, some of whom had played professionally for years, were leaning forward, completely absorbed. The young pianist's skill was undeniable, but it was the emotion, the storytelling through music, that left a lasting impression. The final measures approached, and the young pianist slowed slightly, allowing the last notes to resonate fully. There was a moment of silence after the last key was pressed, a pause that felt heavy and meaningful. Then, as if on cue, the auditorium erupted in applause. It started softly, then grew louder until the room shook with appreciation. People were on their feet cheering, clapping, some with tears in their eyes. The small pianist had done more than play a song. They had created a shared experience, a moment of beauty and skill that no one would forget. The American teacher finally spoke. Her voice was calm, but it carried weight and sincerity. "This is remarkable," she said. "You have talent, yes, but you also have heart, and that is what makes the difference. Never stop learning, never stop listening, and never stop feeling the music." The words, though few, meant more than any long lecture or critique. They were acknowledgement, respect, and encouragement. They confirmed what everyone else in the room had realized. The young pianist was truly exceptional. Backstage, the young pianist exhaled deeply, feeling the rush of adrenaline fade into a calm pride. Parents rushed forward, hugging and praising, while friends clapped them on the back, all smiles and excitement. Even older students who had watched in awe now came forward, offering quiet congratulations. The young pianist felt a sense of accomplishment, but also something deeper. A realization that effort, passion, and courage could overcome doubt and fear, and that love for music could shine through in ways that no one could ignore. For the young performer, the evening was far from over, but a turning point had been reached. The first two performances had built confidence, captivated the audience, and earned the respect of the once skeptical American teacher. The small pianist had shown that talent and dedication could not be underestimated, that age was no barrier to skill, and that music had the power to connect people in ways words never could. As the night continued, the young pianist returned to their seat briefly, still catching their breath and feeling the lingering excitement. The audience's whispers of praise filled the air, along with the occasional excited laughter and the gentle rustle of programs. Friends and parents shared knowing smiles, proud of what they had witnessed, while the American teacher moved on to observe the next student. Though it was clear that the performance they had just seen had left a mark, the young pianist's journey had just begun on this stage. But part 3 of the evening had proven something important. Courage, dedication, and heart could create moments of magic. The music had spoken, the audience had listened, and the teacher had finally seen the truth. It was a night that would be remembered, not just for the notes played, but for the story of perseverance, passion, and talent coming together in a single, unforgettable performance. The applause from the previous performance still echoed faintly in the auditorium when the young pianist returned backstage, heart still racing from the rush of adrenaline. The feeling of success was comforting, yet it was quickly replaced by a new wave of nerves. The evening was far from over, and there were still more pieces to play. This performance would be longer, more challenging, and even more significant in proving the young pianist's skill and heart. Every breath seemed heavier now, filled with anticipation and excitement. Parents crowded around, offering gentle words of encouragement. "You've already done so well," the mother whispered, placing a hand on the pianist's shoulder. "Just keep going, play like you always do, and enjoy the music." The father nodded, giving a reassuring squeeze. "Everyone is watching, but none of that matters. You know your music, you know your heart. Let that guide you." Their words were comforting, Yet the young pianist knew that the challenge ahead was not just about playing the right notes. It was about connecting with the audience and showing what music could truly express. The American teacher, still seated in the front row, observed quietly. Her sharp gaze now softened with interest. She had seen many students perform over the years, yet there was something different about this young pianist. The confidence that had grown with each performance, combined with the pure love for music, was rare. She had expected a child of this age to struggle with the more complex passages, to falter under the weight of pressure. Instead, she saw a performer who had learned to turn nerves into focus, who played with intention and emotion, who had already captured the hearts of the audience. Backstage, the small pianist adjusted the bench and took a deep breath. The sheet music for the next piece lay open, a challenge in itself. It was a longer composition, full of intricate passages, delicate phrases, and rapid sequences that demanded precision and control. The hands hovered over the keys, feeling the smooth surface and imagining the sound that would come. Memories of countless late-night practices, of mistakes corrected and moments of discovery filled the mind. Every note that had been played countless times in solitude was ready to speak again, now in front of an audience who was beginning to understand the depth of talent before them. The audience grew quiet as the pianist stepped onto the stage once more. The lights focused on the small figure at the piano, casting long shadows across the polished floor. Parents held their breath, friends leaned forward in anticipation, and even older students watched silently, captivated. The American teacher, clipboard now set aside, observed intently, ready to take notes, yet aware that perhaps no words could fully capture what was about to unfold. The atmosphere was electric, charged with expectation and curiosity. The first notes of the piece floated into the auditorium softly, almost shyly, yet full of clarity and purpose. Each chord was deliberate, each phrase carefully shaped. The young pianist's fingers moved with confidence, flowing naturally over the keys, translating years of practice into a performance that felt alive. The music was not just technical, it was expressive, telling a story with every note. The audience was immediately drawn in, leaning forward, their attention fully captured. There was something about the way the small hands produced such a big, expressive sound that left everyone in awe. As the piece progressed, the complexity increased. Fast passages demanded perfect timing and coordination, and the young pianist's fingers danced over the keys with precision. The technical challenges were immense, yet the performance never faltered. Each note was clear, each chord resonant, and every dynamic shift purposeful. The audience was mesmerized, and even the American teacher could not hide her astonishment. She watched closely, taking in the mastery of technique, the emotional depth, and the maturity that this young performer displayed. There was no doubt now that she was witnessing something exceptional. Backstage, parents and friends exchanged glances, their pride evident. They had known their child was talented, but the performance before them was beyond what anyone could have imagined. It was not just about hitting the right notes. It was about expression, storytelling, and connection. The young pianist was speaking without words, letting the music convey what was in their heart. Every listener felt it, whether they were a seasoned musician or someone who had never played a note in their life. The power of the performance was undeniable. Halfway through the composition, the music shifted to a softer, more delicate section. The hands moved lightly, barely touching the keys, yet the sound was full and rich. The young pianist's control was remarkable, shaping each note with care and intention. The audience felt the change, leaning in closer as if trying to catch every subtle nuance. The American teacher's eyes narrowed slightly, focusing not on mistakes, there were none, but on how the young pianist interpreted the music, how each phrase was carefully crafted to communicate emotion. It was artistry, not just skill, and it demanded respect. The delicate passages gave way to more dramatic sections, with powerful chords and rapid sequences that tested both speed and endurance. The young pianist's hands moved effortlessly, each note precise, each measure flowing naturally into the next. The audience could feel the energy building, the tension rising and then resolving beautifully. It was a performance that captured both the intellect and the heart, blending technical mastery with emotional storytelling. Every listener was caught in the moment, transported by the music and the young performer's skill. The American teacher's expression softened further. She had seen countless students perform, yet she had rarely witnessed such a combination of talent, discipline, and heart at such a young age. The young pianist had not only met the challenge but had exceeded every expectation. Every note, every phrase, every moment of the performance spoke of dedication, focus, and a deep love for music. She recognized that this was not simply practice paying off. It was the emergence of true artistry. Backstage, the parents were almost as captivated as the audience. They had watched their child grow from someone who struggled with small mistakes to someone who could command a stage with confidence and grace. The pride they felt was immense, yet tempered with a quiet awe at the depth of skill and emotion on display. Friends whispered quietly, sharing their amazement while older students looked on with respect. The small pianist, once underestimated and overlooked, had proven that age was irrelevant when talent and passion were combined. As the performance continued, the young pianist became more and more absorbed in the music. The notes flowed effortlessly, the fingers moving instinctively over the keys. There was a rhythm not just in the music but in the movement of the body, the rise and fall of breath, the connection between mind, hands, and heart. Every phrase was intentional, every pause meaningful, and every crescendo a reflection of emotion. The audience was no longer just listening. They were experiencing the story the music told, fully immersed in the moment. The piece reached its climax with a series of rapid, complex passages. The young pianist's fingers flew across the keys, executing each measure with precision and confidence. The sound was powerful yet controlled, resonant yet expressive. Every listener could feel the intensity, the skill, and the heart that went into each note. The American teacher could only watch in silent admiration, recognizing that this performance was something she would remember for a long time. It was rare to witness such talent, and even rarer to witness it displayed with such sincerity and emotion. As the final measures approached, the music became more reflective, softer, and more lyrical. The young pianist allowed each note to linger, shaping the sound with care and intention. The audience, captivated from start to finish, leaned forward in anticipation, hanging on every subtle nuance. The final chord was struck with confidence and grace, resonating through the auditorium and holding for a heartbeat longer than expected. Silence followed, heavy and meaningful, as the audience absorbed what they had just experienced. Then came the applause. It started softly, tentative at first, but grew louder and louder until the entire auditorium was on its feet. Cheers, claps, and shouts of excitement filled the space. People were moved to tears, some overcome with emotion, others unable to contain their amazement. The young pianist, still seated at the bench, felt a rush of pride and relief. They had not only played the piece flawlessly, but they had also communicated something deeper, something that resonated with everyone in the room. The American teacher approached after the applause had settled, her expression a mix of respect and admiration. "You have a rare gift," she said quietly yet firmly. "It is not just your skill but your heart. You listen, you feel, and you bring the music to life. Never lose that. Keep practicing, keep exploring, and keep sharing your gift with the world." The words were simple, but their weight was immense. It was recognition from someone whose opinion mattered greatly, and it affirmed everything the young pianist had worked for. Backstage, the young pianist was embraced by parents and friends. The sense of pride and joy was overwhelming, but it was also tempered by humility. There was an understanding that this was just one step in a long journey, a moment of triumph, but not the end. The applause, the teacher's praise, and the audience's admiration were all acknowledgments of talent and dedication, but they were also a reminder of the responsibility that came with it. The young pianist had proven themselves, but they also knew there was more to learn, more to explore, and more to share. As the night continued, the young pianist returned to their seat, heart still racing but mind calm. The audience buzzed with discussion and praise, recounting the extraordinary performance they had just witnessed. Even students who had been skeptical earlier were now talking excitedly about the small pianist who had taken the stage and transformed it into something magical. The American teacher, now a quiet presence among the other observers, had clearly been impressed and inspired, her earlier skepticism replaced by genuine admiration. Part 4 of the evening had been a turning point. The young pianist had faced a difficult, demanding piece and had risen to the occasion, captivating the audience and earning the respect of even the most critical teacher. It was a demonstration not only of skill, but of courage, passion, and the ability to communicate emotion through music. The small figure at the piano bench had grown before everyone's eyes. proving that dedication and heart could overcome doubt and fear. The night had grown late, but the energy in the auditorium was far from fading. The young pianist sat quietly backstage, hands resting lightly on the lap, trying to calm the lingering flutter of excitement in the chest. Earlier performances had been challenging yet successful, and the applause had been overwhelming. But now there was one final piece to play, the one that carried the weight of the evening. It was not the most difficult technically, but it demanded every ounce of emotion, every hint of expression, every fragment of courage that the young pianist could summon. Parents stood close by, offering soft words of encouragement. "You've done so well tonight," the mother whispered, brushing a strand of hair from the pianist's forehead. "Just let the music flow. Play from your heart, as you always do." The father nodded, his hand firm on the shoulder. "The audience already knows how special you are. This is just another chance to share it." Their words carried warmth and reassurance, yet they also reminded the young pianist that this moment was theirs to shape. The applause, the praise, the attention, they all mattered less than the music itself. The American teacher, seated in the front row, observed with quiet intensity. Her earlier skepticism had been replaced by something deeper, respect and curiosity. She had seen countless students over the years, but few had combined technical mastery with heartfelt expression in such a young performer. She was a teacher who rarely gave compliments, yet tonight she had witnessed something rare, talent that was unpolished by arrogance, skill that was nurtured by love, and passion that radiated without effort. As the young pianist approached the stage, the audience seemed to sense the significance of this final performance. Conversations died down, eyes focused, and even the soft rustle of programs faded into silence. The stage lights highlighted the small figure at the piano bench, casting a warm glow on the polished instrument. There was an intensity in the young pianist's gaze, a quiet determination that spoke of preparation, practice, and the desire to communicate something beyond the notes. The first notes were gentle, almost shy, but full of clarity and intent. The fingers moved lightly yet with purpose, bringing forth a sound that was both delicate and expressive. The audience leaned forward, captivated immediately. Every chord, every trill, every pause was intentional, shaping a story that unfolded slowly but surely. It was not just a performance, it was an invitation to listen, to feel, and to connect. The young pianist's hands seemed to glide effortlessly over the keys, translating emotion into music in a way that left the audience breathless. Backstage, parents and friends held their breath. The sense of pride was overwhelming, tempered by awe. They had watched their child grow. They had seen dedication and hard work, yet witnessing this level of expression in front of so many people was extraordinary. Friends whispered quietly to one another, amazed at the control, focus, and emotional depth displayed by someone so young. Even older students, some of whom had performed professionally, watched with a mixture of admiration and humility. The small pianist, who had once been underestimated, had grown before their eyes into a performer capable of capturing the hearts of everyone in the room. The American teacher watched intently. She had come expecting to critique, to assess, perhaps even to dismiss the young pianist as inexperienced. Instead, she found herself fully absorbed, unable to look away. She studied the movements of the hands, the subtle shifts in posture, the way the performer breathed with the music, and realized that this was more than technique. It was artistry. There was a depth of understanding, a connection between the pianist and the instrument that could not be taught. It was innate, nurtured through years of love and practice, and evident to anyone willing to see it. As the piece progressed, it demanded both technical skill and emotional maturity. Rapid sequences of notes challenged the young pianist's speed and precision, yet every measure was executed flawlessly. Each section, no matter how complex, flowed naturally into the next, creating a seamless tapestry of sound. The audience felt it, caught in the rhythm, the dynamics, the emotion. Parents leaned closer to their children, friends whispered words of admiration, and even seasoned musicians in the crowd nodded in quiet respect. The performance was more than impressive, it was transformative. Halfway through, the music shifted to a more introspective section. The young pianist's fingers moved lightly, letting each note resonate fully. The room became hushed, almost reverent. The melody spoke of thoughtfulness and vulnerability, yet also of confidence and clarity. The audience felt the story, each person interpreting it through their own experience, each heart touched by the honesty of the performance. Even the American teacher, who had rarely shown emotion, felt a stir of admiration. There was no doubt now. This child was remarkable not just for skill, but for the depth of feeling conveyed through music. The crescendo approached, building slowly and deliberately. The young pianist's hands moved faster now, more confidently, each chord powerful yet controlled. The sound filled the auditorium, resonating through the walls and reaching every corner of the room. The audience could feel the energy, the tension, the emotion. Some held their breath, others whispered quietly in awe, but all were captivated. The music was no longer just notes. It was an experience, a living story, a bridge connecting performer and listener. Backstage, parents and friends felt the tension and excitement as if it were their own. Their pride was immense, but so was the wonder. They had seen countless hours of practice, of mistakes corrected, of perseverance rewarded, but witnessing this performance was unlike anything else. It was a reminder that talent alone was not enough. It was the combination of dedication, heart, and courage that created something truly extraordinary. The young pianist had done more than perform. They had shared a piece of themselves with everyone in the room. The American teacher's expression softened further. She had spent her life critiquing, teaching, and guiding, yet she recognized that some moments could not be captured with words alone. This performance was one of them. She had expected a display of skill, yet what she saw was something deeper: the ability to tell a story, to convey emotion, and to connect with an audience in a way that transcended age and experience. She felt a quiet admiration, a respect that only came from witnessing something rare and authentic. The final measures approached, and the young pianist slowed slightly, shaping each note with care. The audience leaned in, hanging on every sound. The music was delicate yet powerful, precise yet filled with emotion. Each chord resonated, each pause held weight, and each movement of the hands carried intention. The performance was complete, but the impact lingered, filling the room with a sense of awe and wonder. When the last note faded, there was a moment of silence. It was not awkward or empty. It was heavy with meaning, with the collective recognition of what had just been experienced. Then, as if on cue, the audience erupted into applause. It started softly but quickly grew louder and louder until the entire auditorium was on its feet. Cheers, claps, and shouts of excitement filled the room. Some were moved to tears, others unable to contain their amazement. The young pianist, still seated at the bench, felt a rush of pride, relief, and gratitude. The American teacher approached quietly, her steps measured but deliberate. She looked at the young pianist with a mix of respect, admiration, and genuine warmth. "You have a rare gift," she said softly. "Not just skill but heart. You listen, you feel, and you share that with others. That is what makes a true musician. Keep playing, keep learning, and never lose that connection with the music." The words were simple, yet their impact was immense. Recognition from someone so esteemed carried weight beyond measure. Backstage, parents rushed forward, embracing their child with tears in their eyes. Friends clapped, whispered congratulations, and exchanged wide smiles. Even older students, some of whom had performed on stages far larger, offered quiet praise.